Hey guys, thanks so much for letting me know about the mute here. I think that I've fixed and resolved the issues. Apologies for the technicality issues there. If you guys in the chat could just, all right, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Thanks so much everyone for joining me tonight. I appreciate you joining here. I will be talking about the tropics tonight and the evolving danger situation that we're watching and monitoring over the Gulf of Mexico. 2020 has been a year so far that's brought us so much pain and hardship. We've seen just from coronavirus to devastating wildfires out in California, and now we have another challenge ahead of us here, and that is developing over the Gulf of Mexico, and specifically a pair of two tropical cyclones that will be imminently landfalling here across the Gulf states, and something that we have not really seen yet to date, potentially two landfalling hurricanes back to back in a very similar location or within the same vicinity, setting up what could be a devastating situation down in the Gulf states. And we're potentially monitoring this happen from anywhere from Texas to Louisiana and as far east as parts of Mississippi. There's still uncertainty in the situation. So tonight, I'm going to plan on doing a weather discussion, try to provide as much information as I can here to look at the up-to-date information, and please feel free to ask questions on what's happening here, and I will get to that later on after I go through some of the discussion here. So I'm going to share my screen and focus on the National Hurricane Center outlook. We have these two tropical cyclones, Hurricane Marco, which is pretty upgraded this afternoon into a Category 1 hurricane. It's currently at a 75 mile per hour sustained wind with a mean central pressure of 922 millibars. The system's getting close to the Louisiana border, and we'll take a look at the National Hurricane Center, but they are predicting a landfall here as a Category 1 hurricane across Louisiana. The second system of interest, and this is the one that I'm most concerned about here, is Tropical Storm Laura. And currently, Laura is only at a 50 mile per hour maximum sustained winds with a central pressure of 1,004 millibars. Laura is interacting with land right now. It's been interacting with the mountains of Hispaniola, and it's currently skirting south of Cuba. The question is, what happens to Laura as it moves and enters the Gulf of Mexico? And we're having some issues in the models right now resolving that intensity. There's potential here that the system remains relatively weak, tropical storm, and as it tracks into the Gulf of Mexico, into the Gulf states, and there's potential here for a devastating Category 4 or Category 5 major hurricane landfall across the Gulf states. There's a large range of outcomes here with this system. So we'll begin with the background setup. We'll look at how the environment is set up right now for this potential, for the potential event of landfalling hurricanes, and for what that means moving forward into the Atlantic hurricane season over the next few weeks. We look at sea surface temperatures. These are actual temperatures in degrees Celsius. This is from Tropical Tidbits webpage. And we see some of the warmest ocean waters across parts of the equatorial Indian Ocean, where we typically find them, and in the Western Pacific. The warm waters in the Western Pacific is part of an ocean cycle that's known as La Nina, which essentially in La Nina states you see warm ocean waters in the Western Pacific and a stronger than normal cold tongue in the Eastern Pacific. La Nina summers have been conducive for some of our most active hurricane seasons in history across the Atlantic Basin. Now I want to focus on the Atlantic Basin. You can also see that there's some pink shadings over the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean Sea. Let me zoom in on that a bit and show you with a little bit more resolution with the actual temperatures shown in the text strings here. We have some of the warmest ocean temperatures on the planet located in the Western Caribbean, parts of the Western subtropical Atlantic, and the Gulf of Mexico. I'm seeing 31 C temperatures in parts of the Gulf of Mexico. This is essentially the ocean setting up in a state that allows for these developing tropical cyclones to extract energy from the ocean and essentially allow for these intensifying hurricanes over the Gulf of Mexico. Now, it depends on the atmospheric state, right? If there's a lot of wind shear over the Gulf of Mexico, one system moving into that shear might struggle, and that's kind of what we're seeing right now with Hurricane Marco. But if the wind shear reduces, then we're moving into a state that the ocean's favorable for strong intensification, and then the atmosphere could be as well. If we look at how ocean temperatures rank compared to normal, we've seen a warming trend since the end of spring into early summer, where now ocean temperatures are ranging between about 0.6 degrees Celsius to 0.8 degrees Celsius, maybe even just under 1°C. There's some volatility in here day to day, so it could be a little bit noisy, but these are very warm ocean temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico, anomalously warm. And what does that mean for ocean heat content? Well, ocean heat content is something that, when a tropical cyclone moves over an area of high ocean heat content, there's a lot of energy there from the ocean that will usually allow a storm to intensify. Now, Marco actually is in a particular region where there's relatively low ocean heat content. There's some potential there for that Marco could be interacting with the ocean right now, and it may be producing some upwelling. It's hard to tell. This is just pretty new data, and this could be potentially, there could be some feedbacks there. But what I'm more interested in is where Tropical Storm Laura tracks across this pretty high ocean heat content, and some of the models are suggesting that it should move over to some of these other elevated heat content locations in the Gulf of Mexico, parts of western Gulf of Mexico, northwestern Gulf of Mexico. And that's where we could see our danger situation evolve. So we had a lull in activity over the past two weeks or so. I mean, we started a record pace for this Atlantic hurricane season, right? I feel like every storm we saw, there was record-setting fastest to this letter of the alphabet, right? Fastest letter to C, fastest storm to D, etc. It's been very active, and then it quieted down for a period of time, and now we've seen activity reemerge over the Atlantic Basin and threaten the U.S. here with hurricanes. Well, there was something called a convectively coupled atmospheric Kelvin wave that passed the tropical Atlantic Basin. The blue shading in this map, you can see it moving from west to east near the equatorial band. This is essentially a transitional wave in the atmosphere that allows for a more conducive environment over the tropical Atlantic for developing hurricanes. This wave also actually helps spawn the seedlings, these things called African easterly waves that develop over Africa and then travel back over the Atlantic and can then later spawn into hurricanes as well and threaten our U.S. and other parts of the world. So this was a major change in our pattern across the tropical Atlantic that resulted in a uptick in developing tropical cyclone activity, and we're seeing that now. What we're looking at in the next image is something called precipitable water. You see these reds and pinks. Essentially, that's an indication that the atmosphere is becoming very moist. And it can outline the spins of these tropical cyclones that were Hurricane Marco is shown in the northern part of the central Gulf of Mexico, north of the Yucatan Peninsula. It is nearing landfall across parts of Louisiana and the Gulf states. We will get to this in a little while. We'll break down each storm here and give as much information as we can. And then we have our next tropical storm here. This is Tropical Storm Laura, and you can see how these elevated precipitable water values are moving across parts of Hispaniola and moving across parts of Cuba. If you look your eyes out over the tropical Atlantic, you see a little bit less orange shade. You get some more blues and purples out there. That's essentially representing dry air. We typically get these areas of dry air that get evicted off of Africa every time a strong easterly wave gets pushed off. We know these are called Saharan air layer outbreaks. But this, the point I'm trying to get here is while we have these two potentially dangerous hurricanes and soon-to-be hurricanes bearing down on the U.S., there will be more to come. And we'll see the activity start over the main development region. We're going to have to track future waves coming from Africa towards the U.S. over the Atlantic main development region. So we'll finish up here in the large-scale environment, and we'll look at how wind shear is currently situated over the U.S. and parts of the Gulf of Mexico. It might be hard to see that in this map here. Let's zoom in a little bit. This is a map of the United States of America, and the colors represent where shear winds are unfavorable for intensifying tropical cyclones. And you can see right now there's an area of enhanced vertical wind shear. This is southwesterly vertical wind shear over much of the northwestern part of the Gulf of Mexico into the southeastern U.S. This is what's keeping Hurricane Marco at bay. right? We've seen some intensification of Hurricane Marco. It became a hurricane earlier this afternoon. But what's going to happen now is this storm is actually going to track into this area of enhanced vertical wind shear, and it will start to shift that shear a bit further inland over to the southern U.S. So what essentially Hurricane Marco is doing is it's clearing the stage for what will be potentially Hurricane Laura as it tracks across the Gulf of Mexico and towards the Texas-Louisiana border. So here is the current infrared imagery. We're going to focus more so now on these individual systems, and we'll talk about what that means and when to expect impacts here in the U.S. We're looking currently at the infrared imagery from the GOES-16 satellite, and we can see two main areas of interest here. Here's Hurricane Marco. We had a really nice convective burst earlier this afternoon, and that's started to wane off, but there is still some convection percolating there near the core. And here's Tropical Storm Laura, just moving off of the western side of Hispaniola and sneaking now to the south of Cuba. The circulation is still south of Cuba, and there's been so much interaction here with land that's been tripping the models, particularly in where to initialize this potential tropical cyclone, or this future hurricane, excuse me. And we're still having issues today in resolving where that storm is going to go and how strong it'll get. Let's zoom in on what is now Hurricane Marco. This is the infrared imagery. If you're losing your bearing here, this is the New Orleans peninsula here. You can see that, just the southeastern tip of Louisiana. Here's the deepest convection now, just pushing north of 25 north. You can see that there's been a new convective burst near the center of the storm. Now the storm is still experiencing enhanced vertical wind shear. That's not why we're not seeing this nice symmetrical hurricane-looking appearance on satellite. If we zoom in a little bit more on the visible satellite here, and we can see how some of that new convective burst is really showing the impressive overshooting tops. There's some nice shadows that kind of emerge on the southeastern side of the storm, and that's from those big convective vertical hot towers. You can kind of see this, like from east to west, this line coming in. That's essentially the sun setting on the storm. So this is updating in real time. But again, this storm is it doesn't look like one of those monster hurricanes on the satellite. Now, it's a Category 1 hurricane. And Category 1 hurricanes are still dangerous in their own right? They still bring winds and they still bring rain. And this is essentially the storm that is changing the environment of the Gulf of Mexico that could potentially allow for a more devastating impact from Hurricane Laura once that passes through. Now, earlier this afternoon, our hurricane hunters identified a core of 64 knot winds, and that was enough to upgrade this tropical cyclone into a Hurricane Marco. Now you can always see these are great images from Tropical Tidbits. Levi Cohen did a good job of putting these together. You can see the flight paths of where the plane goes. That's why we see these green and orange wind barbs on here. When essentially each wind barb is color coordinated by the wind speed. So if you see these blues, essentially those were lighter winds. As you get in the yellows, oranges, and reds and purples, those are the stronger winds. So when the recon plane went past the core of Marco, we found those strong enough winds to identify this as a hurricane. So just to kind of clarify what I mean by hurricanes, Category 1, Category 2, etc., the National Hurricane Center does a good job of showing what these categories mean and what the sustained wind speeds are and what type of impacts those brings. So Category 1 hurricanes, even though they're the weakest classification of hurricanes, they're still very dangerous and they can produce damage. Strong enough damage to hurt your roofs on your houses or shingles or vinyls and gutters. You still need to prepare for Category 1 hurricanes. Now, as you move into the higher categories, though, this is where you get into those extreme landfalling events, catastrophic damage for the major hurricanes. And while Marco is not going to serve as categorical damage, it is still going to impact an area, a part of the world, a part of the United States of America that we just don't want to see suffer anymore, right? From the infamous Hurricane Katrina landfall in 2005. We know that New Orleans has suffered enough from hurricanes, but unfortunately we still have to watch these things impact that part of the world, and we're still monitoring this situation closely, but that's where we're expecting Marco to move forward. There was an infrared, a microwave scan earlier today. This is actually from the morning of Marco, and we could see a pretty robust comma shape. I couldn't find an update to this product, so I was hoping that by the time the stream went live, we would get that, but unfortunately, we don't. But there was this nice comma shape in the ice scattering, and we did have an update, 18Z. I'm actually kind of interested here to see the SSMIS channel here to see if we can get a little bit better visibility. But okay, so here's the current ice scattering signature of Hurricane Marco. We have one robust vertical hot tower here. We don't see a robust eye yet with this feature. Again, the system is fighting wind shear right now. Here is the evolution of the circulation of Hurricane Marco. This is again a microwave imagery produced by the SIMS channel, which is this is called the MIMIC product, the morphed integrated microwave imagery at SIMS. And this essentially just shows you the evolution of the structure. Essentially, you're popping the hood of the car and you're looking at the engine. And you have a nice little reading of where the max winds are at this time. You can see how the circulation did brush by the western side of Cuba and now is trenched over the central Gulf of Mexico, yet we still have not yet seen a strong wrap up of this storm, and we still don't really see any indications of an eye yet developing. And I'm hoping that remains that way. Essentially, models are indicating that potentially we could see a little bit more intensification of the system prior to landfall, but they're not predicting yet a really Category 2 or higher storm. It's mainly a Cat 1. This is the official National Hurricane Center forecast for Hurricane Marco. Essentially, what it's doing here, this is a cone of uncertainty. So the storm could pretty much end up anywhere inside of this cone as it tracks towards the southern U.S. here. The reason why we put these cones out is because there's uncertainty in our models, and it's hard to predict precisely where this will make landfall. But you can see with time, as you move out forward in time, the cone expands. And that's because your uncertainty expands on where it will track futurely. But the best estimated guess right now for the track of Hurricane Marco is west of New Orleans. But however, that doesn't mean that the whole part of, the whole peninsula here of southeastern Louisiana is out of the woods here, because unfortunately, the northeastern quadrant of a landfalling tropical cyclone is usually the most impactful region. And that's because you typically get a lot of onshore flow that's pushing water towards land. So that can enhance something known as storm surge, where your oceans get very rough and they begin to push inland and flood parts of the coast and potentially inland. And we saw these types of events during Katrina, where we saw like a ton of storm surge and breaking of levees, etc. It was bad. And while we're not expecting it as bad as that, we're still looking at these similar types of impacts where there's going to be wind, there's going to be rain, and there will be some storm surge. I was seeing some model projections of 4 to 6 feet storm surge here in parts of eastern Louisiana. Now, as we move towards the next 24 hours, the National Hurricane Center does predict that Marco will be approaching land, and the landfall location does look to be east of New Orleans as it kind of skirts along the coast of southern Louisiana. So this is going to be an impactful hurricane landfall for pretty much all of southern coast of Louisiana there. And as it moves into eastern Texas, it does suggest that the models are suggesting that the storm will begin to weaken into a tropical depression, so the winds will start to reduce in amplitude. But again, this is going to be a landfalling hurricane, Category 1 at the current time frame prediction. Now, we still have problems with our intensity forecast, but with the enhanced vertical wind shear drenched across this part of the world, it's going to be really difficult for Marco to really get going into a much stronger hurricane than a Cat 1. So we are still expecting impacts. And again, if we look at some of the model forecasts here from Tropical Tidbits, each line represents a different model forecast. You can still see how there's uncertainty in where this tropical cyclone will potentially go. There's still risk. It could landfall directly over New Orleans, and then it seems like most of the risk for landfall is west of that location. So that's why the National Hurricane Center has their cone stretched out so wide, anywhere from New Orleans across eastern Texas there. So this is exactly why they're putting their cone in that way, because there still is this uncertainty in where the storm eventually goes. Now, if we look at the intensity of Hurricane Marco, this is a forecast now, where essentially on your y-axis is your wind speeds, your predicted wind speeds in knots, and in your x-axis is time, where time is going from left to right. You can see that there are some models that do intensify Hurricane Marco a little bit more, but they don't bring this into a significantly strong hurricane, a major hurricane. It stays it as a Cat 1 hurricane or potentially weakens it into a tropical storm. So again, this is still going to be an impactful storm, but it's not going to be a major hurricane landfall. If we look at some of the Atlantic ships intensity forecasts here, for this particular Hurricane Marco here, we do see that with winds predicting to be around 66, 67 knots, so that's right around 70 mile per hour with sustained winds. It's enough to rip umbrellas up, again, hurt your roofs, damage shingles. So there is still that threat there for this to happen. But again, if you look at the vertical wind shear here, it does look like shear will continuously increase with time, especially as it moves onshore, which is predicted to be in the next, according to the National Hurricane Center, anywhere from the next 24 to 48 hours. We're looking at a potential landfall around Tuesday morning, early in the morning, around 1 a.m. So if we look at the 12Z HWAR forecast, this is the simulated infrared imagery for Hurricane Marco. I'm starting off around 18Z from today, so this afternoon, and I move forward here in the simulation. We can see that the model, I may have to refresh here, so I apologize for that. A little bit of lag here on my end. So here we go. So we do see that the model does expand the cloud shield as it moves closer to the U.S., but again, we don't see that real organization, robust eye at all of this particular hurricane. And this particular model run brought it over eastern Louisiana. It's probably a little bit of an outlier to the east here of the envelope. Again, the National Hurricane Center thinks that the storm will end up more central Louisiana. But I wanted to illustrate the fact that it's just, on satellite, the predicted imagery, it doesn't look like just this, a robust eye, like a buzzsaw type of storm. Again, there still will be impacts, but it's the first storm to kind of clear out the environment for what's to come behind it. And to show the timing of when we might experience some of these impacts here, this is a product out of the National Hurricane Center that shows you early time of tropical storm force winds. So those tropical storm force winds are strong enough to cause some damage, and it does look like around Monday morning we will start to feel some winds across the southeastern part of Louisiana, and as we move into the afternoon, you do see that those winds do become a bit more likely around western central Louisiana, and as you move out into Monday night to Tuesday morning, that's where the storm will be pushing across eastern Texas, and we do expect the winds to start to die down as the storm interacts with land and frictional processes begin to weaken it. All right, so with Hurricane Marco, I am concerned with impacts, but less concerned with impacts compared to Tropical Storm Laura. On what I think will be one of the more main events of 2020 Atlantic hurricane season. And right now, Tropical Storm Laura is currently pushing west of Hispaniola, south of Cuba. The models have been struggling with the initialization of the storm quite frequently through the last 24 hours. It's having a hard time finding the center that interacts with all this landmass. This is still over a lot of mass there, and trying to circulation of a tropical cyclone that's quite weak in amplitude, and how it interacts with that topography is difficult. And trying to initialize your models there is nearly impossible unless you have some recon going. If we look at the infrared imagery, it starts off with visible red. You do see that there are a series of overshooting cloud tops here early on in the evening, and then as the infrared imagery stops in, you can see that goes away. But here's the series of these overshooting cloud tops. So this system is convectively active. But again, we start to see some of the curvature here on the north flank of this system. There is some dry air kind of getting entrained there on the northward flank, but it's it's unclear whether or not that dry air is getting into the surface, into the central circulation. The circulation is still south of Cuba right now, and we're still in this phase where we're going to have to interact. The storm has to interact with land, and that land's going to cause disruptions in the circulation at this point. We look at the infrared imagery under the hood, and we see how the storm structure looks. You get this comma-shaped feature in the 85 gigahertz product, and this is essentially indicating ice scattering again. You get that comma-shaped structure. That's what you typically see during tropical storms. So this isn't a hurricane at any means yet. We can see how this system evolves with time as it skirts south of Puerto Rico and south of the DR and into like southwestern Haiti. I did see some reports of over 350 millimeter rainfall totals from this storm already in parts of the Dominican Republic, which is analogous to 13, 14 inches of rain. So there has been heavy rains in parts of the DR from this system. But again, you can see how the brightest colors are pretty much south of the islands now, and that's where all the deepest connection is. The circulation is just south of Cuba. And if we move forward in the forecast now, this is where things get a bit scarier and a bit more interesting from a tropical perspective. But if folks living in the Gulf of Mexico, this is what I'm about to show you here is a worst case scenario prediction from a model called the HWRF. Now, this is a model that's typically used by the Hurricane Center, but it has its issues in overcooking the intensity of storms at times. But it did do a good job. Let me be clear, this model did a very good job at predicting the intensification of Dorian last year. We struggle as meteorologists in our predictions of intensity of hurricanes, and that's because the models have a hard time in resolving the processes that intensify these hurricanes, essentially the convection. So I'm going to loop through this model run here and show you what it did. This is moving forward here tonight into the next 24 hours, and you can see as the system, as Tropical Storm Laura skirts south of Cuba and west of Cuba, it looks disorganized. I want to say, guys, as we see Marco move inland, we're going to see vertical wind shear die down over the Gulf of Mexico. And with 30 degrees Celsius waters, there is an opportunity here for rapid intensification of this hurricane. And that is what the HWRF model is predicting. As we move into Tuesday afternoon now, we start to see a more robust circulation with what appears to be an eye trying to develop. As we move into Wednesday evening now, we can see a very high brightness temperatures near the central circulation. And as we move into the early morning of Wednesday now, this is where the storm really gets a dangerous appearance. We start to see an eye wall developing in the model's forecast. And by 8 a.m. Eastern Time, Wednesday, this is where the model is indicating a rapid intensification that took place. And a eye pops out, and we can see how this system then becomes a major hurricane as it tracks towards the Texas-Louisiana border. This is not what we want to see as tropical meteorologists, and this is definitely not what we want to see. You want to see as residents living in the path of this potential system. Again, the models are having issues with intensity. What I'm showing right now is a worst case scenario. We still are not clear yet if this is what is exactly going to happen, but there is support from other models in such a solution. So we need to pay attention to that. Now, the National Hurricane Center, it predicts that this storm will take a similar track to what we just observed in the HWRF as it tracks across parts of Cuba, and then as it moves out over the central Gulf of Mexico, that is where we see the National Hurricane Center bring this Wednesday morning into a Category 1 hurricane. From there, the National Hurricane Center suggests there could be a landfall anywhere from southeastern Texas in the Houston vicinity all the way to like a central Louisiana. There's still a large spread in the possibilities here of where this potential storm is going, but notice that there is a chance that the storm takes a similar path to what Marco just tracked. Okay, that Marco will just be tracking, and that's literally, if we look at the Marco forecast in this area, this is Tuesday afternoon when Marco will be impacting that part of Louisiana, southern coast of Louisiana. If we go to fast forward in time, by Wednesday afternoon, they're going to be dealing with another hurricane. So if Marco impacts Louisiana and at a point where people will lose part of their homes, let's say they get storm surge or their roof gets ripped off, they're going to have to deal with another hurricane the next day. I don't think I've ever seen this type of consecutive 1-2 punch in this part of the world. This is bad. This is not a good scenario. And if the HWARF scenario comes out with a Category 4 or higher major hurricane, this could be devastating for this part of the U.S. And relief efforts is just going to be stalled, right? If you had a landfalling hurricane, you send relief to that part of the world, but there's going to be another hurricane in 24 hours. It's just something absurd, and it just screams 2020 to me. Now, another thing that, something that this is going to disrupt is there's a lot of oil rigs out in this part of the world, right? And there will be, I guarantee if this storm gets as strong as what some of the models are suggesting, there will be emergency evacuations from these folks, from these rigs out of here. They're going to see some rigs shut down there, possibly. Now, if we look at the ship's diagnostic message for Laura, this is the wind speed forecast, right? And again, this model is not going to do a great job with predicting the exact winds, okay? But I do want to show here is the chance of rapid intensification. So I go down here to the bottom, and we can take a look at what ship suggests is the probability for rapid intensification of Laura. And they do these different thresholds, 20 knots in 12 hours, 25 knots in 24 hours, all the way up to 40 knots in 24 hours, etc. And then I'm interested in here in this this 65 knots over 72 hours, so the next 3 days, because we know this storm still has some time to move out of the Gulf of Mexico. Well, they're giving this model is giving us a 33% chance, which is over 6 times the climatological mean. There's a good chance here, according to this statistical model, that Tropical Storm Laura, future Hurricane Laura, will rapidly intensify. And that's where we're going to have to pay attention here for how bad this storm could potentially be. So if you are living in any parts of either one of these hurricanes, or hurricane or future hurricane, there is a website that will help you prepare for what you need to do. And some of these preparations here, I want to just go through them here. If you're not, obviously if you live in the Gulf of Mexico, you're pretty aware of what to do. But in case you're not, you just moved there, you want to pay attention, you want to hear it again. This is some of the things that you should be doing. We're talking about the hurricane risk now, right? Make an emergency plan. Talk to your family members. Understand what's going on and where you're going to go. And keep in mind that there is coronavirus going on. So, on top of the pandemic that has just been crippling our nation, you're going to have to deal with a hurricane or 2 hurricanes. And that just makes things 10 to 100 million times worse. Make sure you start to gather supplies. Have enough supplies for your households to get you through a potentially long spell of your town shutting down. People with disabilities, make sure you have plans for them. Make sure if you have a family member with disabilities, make sure that you have a plan for those family members. Obviously, know your evacuation zones. Make sure you know what routes you can take if you're evacuated from your area. I can tell you right now, if the HWARF solution's right with that Category 4 or 5 hurricane, you're going to be evacuating out of those parts of the world that is going to bear down on, in parts of either eastern Texas or western central Louisiana. Pay attention to the National Hurricane Center. Those guys are the experts in the field. Their job is to protect you and try to protect your property as best they can. Obviously, they can't protect you from a major hurricane landfall, but they can help you plan for they give you the information that can help you allow you to plan for what you're going to do to how to protect your property. Make sure you have your important documents. Your IDs are up to date. Keep your copies of them, etc. Take care of your homes. Help your neighbors. Prepare your businesses. There's a whole list here. This is ready.gov/hurricanes, guys. All right, so I wanted to show off some of the simulations from our IBM graph model. And I got the approval from the developers here to put this out on the stream. And this is our 3-kilometer graph model. This is old here, so this is a bit outdated, but I wanted to show how the model looks and how you can see how there's all these little these little cells of green and yellows. This is because this model is 3 kilometers. It can resolve convection on its own. But you see that here are 2 disturbances. There are 2 tropical cyclones. Here's Hurricane Marco, and here's Tropical Storm Laura skirting south of Cuba. Again, you can see that the prediction over the next 12 to 15 hours of Hurricane Marco does not show significant intensification. This is our IBM graph model. And the model also shows a south skirt over Cuba to the southern coast of Cuba, and there's going to be rain across parts of southern Cuba. So if you're watching the stream down from Cuba, you can expect some rain, some winds there. Now you can see there's an Atlantic ridge. It's actually shifted westward over the western subtropical Atlantic, and you can kind of see all these clouds and rain and cells moving counterclockwise around this high pressure system, as they typically do. And you can see that this high pressure system is the steering flow for these tropical cyclones to come right into parts of the southeastern U.S. Now, that our high resolution 3-kilometer graph model, it only runs out 15 hours, and it runs every hour, so we continuously update this and update this. If you're interested in seeing the predictions of those models, we do show them in the precipitation forecast field on your Weather Channel app on your phone, your iPhone, or your Android. Okay, so we also have a second version of this model, and this is a bit more coarser resolution model. This is a 15-kilometer version of the model, IBM graph 15-kilometer, and it runs out a little bit further in time. And it does. We're looking at, let's say, about 48 hours right now, and this is the evolution of how the model handles Tropical Storm Laura. And as we move forward here on the loop, you do see the model steadily drop in pressure down into the lower 970s, and then all of a sudden here, within an hour, the model significantly drops pressure, almost 12 millibars. 12 millibar drop in pressure. And this is happening on Tuesday afternoon. This is a quick drop in the pressure, and it's obviously fluctuating a bit because it's trying to resolve all those mesoscale features. 15 kilometers is still not high enough resolution to do that, but I just wanted to focus out as the run gets closer to nearing the coast of Louisiana. This model also drops this hurricane into a major hurricane pressure, and it does wrap up the system quite subtly, similar to where the WRF is doing and where it's tracking it. So, this is a problem that we're dealing with here. We have 2 hurricanes bearing down. Right now, it's actually 1 hurricane with a tropical storm, but the tropical storm is going to likely intensify to a hurricane. It's something that I wanted to point out here where the spread in the models are for Hurricane Laura, future Hurricane Laura. This is the latest GFS ensemble parallel tracks initialized at 18Z, and you do see that there's quite the spread in where the system's going to go. This is the uncertainty component. This is why the National Hurricane Center expands their cone of uncertainty. And some of the most devastating intensification, some of the highest, the lowest pressures or fastest wind speeds are those scenarios that are more geared towards Texas or western Louisiana. And the weaker scenarios bring this into central eastern Louisiana. So if this is going to be a very strong hurricane, like the HWRF is suggesting and our IBM graph 15 kilometers is suggesting, as well as the UK Met and what some of the GFS operational runs are showing, it's going to be something that's probably going to impact Texas here in parts of western Louisiana. So that's one component of uncertainty, and a lot of that uncertainty has to do with how the storm gets shot off of Cuba and how if it can regain its core structure. Let's take a look at the intensity forecast now. Again, this is looking at categorical wind speeds. The green is tropical storm, yellow, orange, red, pink is stronger or higher intensity hurricane intensities. And there's pretty much most of the model guidance is bringing this into a category 1 or 2 hurricane, with a couple of models going into the major category 3 and category 4. So there's a large spread in the intensity here of the tropical cyclone, of this future hurricane, but most of the guidance is supporting at least a Category 1 and potentially a major hurricane. And I can tell you right now, our models have a hard time with resolving the processes that initiate rapid intensification. If there's any threat of rapid intensification in these intensity forecasts, I am concerned. I will pay attention to those. It's the best time to communicate those threats now, where you have 2 to 3 days to potentially prepare for such a threat. So for Laura, this is a much more impactful hurricane, in my opinion, for the Gulf states than Marco could potentially be, though Marco still will be a impactful system. And this is the one here. If 2020 is going to have a feature hurricane, Laura could be that feature hurricane and one of those storms that potentially goes down in our record books. The potential is there because of the weakening wind shear, thanks to Marco clearing out that wind shear field and to the high 30 degree waters. Okay, so I'm very concerned about this potential system, and this is the big one here that could potentially make a landfall right after Marco within 24 to 48 hours, which is just not a recipe that you want to see, especially during a time where we've struggled so much as a nation with COVID. Okay, guys, I want to finish up here and talk about some of the longer range forecasts, understanding what's beyond Marco, what's beyond Laura. And I'm going to do that through my fun spaghetti diagram plot here. This is from the ECMWF ensembles. This is the 12Z cycle. And I want to focus on here, if I go out, I'm moving out in time in the forecast hour here. Here's Laura. I just want to show you in comparison how the model predicts Marco. You can see that the blue contours, there's some blue contours there, some lower pressures, but it's not anything as significant as what the models are projecting for Laura to be. Whereas you start to see some of the red contours here. Those are even some deeper predicted pressure. And you can see how the spread ranges from anywhere from Texas to Louisiana for a landfall. And then actually what's going to happen here is this storm is probably going to rotate anticyclonically or clockwise around the mid-Atlantic ridge that's extended over the western subtropical Atlantic. And we're seeing uncertainty in how fast that process happens. And there are some scenarios here that show there's one number that shows a very slow progression inland across southern Texas, just where Hurricane Hannah hit earlier this season, and it stalls it there for a little period of time. That's a similar track and progression of what happened with Hurricane Harvey a couple years back, or a few years back now. That's something that we'll have to keep an eye on. But most of the models, these ensemble members, takes the storm inland and they push it across parts of the interior southeastern U.S. and pushes it out across the mid-Atlantic states. But there's uncertainty here on how quickly this happens, what type of timing we're looking at. Anywhere, the storm could still be over Texas for 2 to 3 days, or it could be already out over the mid-Atlantic states and out over the western subtropical Atlantic at some point later in time. Now, I also want to focus in on what's coming in from the main development region. With that Kelvin wave coming across the Atlantic's main development region and moving over Africa, what that Kelvin wave is going to do is it's going to spawn new easterly waves that then track back westward towards the tropical Atlantic or the main development region. And the models are starting to highlight another risk here for a new tropical cyclone to develop. And you can see here that there's a good amount of clustering here going on for this next tropical cyclone and potentially another one behind it. There could be a train of tropical cyclones coming out off of Africa here with continuing our intra-seasonal active period in the hurricane season. And from there, it's uncertain where these storms are going to go, right? We're seeing a huge spread in the outcome of that next storm. And I think we're on the end storm right now, right? This is potentially going to be Nana. I made the joke earlier, I think yesterday, the next tropical storm or Hurricane Nana is going to be one mean cookie or one tough cookie, because that's how our grandmas typically are, right? But no, this storm is again a threat that could track towards the eastern seaboard, and there are some members there that bring this into Florida or the Carolinas, but there are members that keep it out over the western or central subtropical Atlantic. which would be an ideal scenario for me. I don't want to see any more hurricanes hit the U.S., especially about what we're about to witness here in the coming 48 to 72 hours. So, but there's more activity coming, guys, and that's because we're in this intraseasonal window that's favorable for development. And I think here that I wanted to show why the Atlantic hurricane season is coming back to life. And this is something that I studied in graduate school, and I continued my career on trying to understand this process, and that's called the Madden-Julian oscillation. And for anyone who is watching the stream here, where you're seeing this image, this is a tropical meteorologist's best friend. We love looking at this image because it tells us so much information about time, and it tells us information about space. So time is going down on the y-axis here. There's actually a forecast of data below this black line. It's kind of hard to see here. I apologize for that. There's a lot going on. On the x-axis is longitude. If you don't like to look at the numbers here, there's a little mini map underneath it so you can see where you are in the world. So like on the left side of this image here, this is Africa. So this is all the data over Africa. If you look at the South American area, you can just bring your eyes directly up here. This is all South America data. So these black dashed contours is what I want you to focus on. And this is the convectively active phase of the Madden-Julian oscillation. This is essentially where air is rising from the MJO. The MJO is this just this monster circulation in the tropics that once it passes a particular region in the world, it can really help enhance rainfall. It can spawn tropical gyres. You can get hurricane outbreaks after it passes. When it passes the Atlantic Ocean, which is what it's doing right now, and it moves across Africa, this is the most favorable state for developing Atlantic hurricanes. And so this, guys, right now, from today, unfortunately, you guys can't see my cursor, I apologize for that. Unfortunately, today until maybe mid-September, maybe even to the third week of September, that is where we're going to see the most active hurricane period in our 2020 season, okay? We are moving into the state where, and this quote, this coincidentally coincides with our climatological peak in hurricane activity, right? We always talk about September as the most favorable time frame for hurricanes. Well, it's going to be true this year. Again, September is looking like late August into September is going to be a time frame here where we see a period of active hurricanes, and it's going to be coming as a result of this passage of this Madden-Julian oscillation. So, for the next 3 weeks, we are not out of the clear here. We're already seeing 2 potential hurricanes landfall in the U.S. with a potential third as you move into the first or second week of September. And I think there's going to be more coming off Africa after that. We're going to have to pay attention here, guys. This is where it gets very active. And unfortunately here, we've already seen quite the active season, right? If we already look at our number of storms, we're already at number 13, at least 13 tropical storms, with potentially our 14th coming up. We're 2 storms ahead of where we were in 2005, which is our record-setting hurricane season. I don't know if we're going to ever repeat a 2005, right? 2005 had I think it was 28 named storms and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 major hurricanes. I mean, we had major hurricanes in 2005 back in July, and we haven't had any yet this year. But I think we're close to having our first one with Laura. But I mean, we're at a very active hurricane season, and I've talked about that in my Wednesday lunch series. Why that's the case? The Bay State is just favoring it this year, especially when things like the Madden-Julian oscillation enhance the Bay State, and that's what we're looking at now. So, guys, I wanted to put this stream out here because it's an evolving situation. It's a dangerous situation for folks residing in the Gulf states, and it's something that there's uncertainty in the forecast still, right? And the models are going to continuously resolve this. I mean, if we talked about this, 4 or 5 days ago, some folks didn't believe that there wouldn't even be a hurricane from these systems, right? Now we're looking at 1, now potentially 2. There's going to be more systems coming off Africa here because of what I just talked about, the Kelvin waves and the MGO. So it's something that, we're just in a state here that is priming for the Atlantic hurricanes, and unfortunately we're going to have to deal consequences. So as I'm here to answer any questions here, I appreciate everyone watching the stream. I'm going to try to scroll up a little bit and answer some of the questions that were asked earlier and move forward from there. Again, apologies for the technicalities in the sound. I'm actually still new to Twitch, and I'm learning as I go. So I asked the question, do I think Dr. Mao would tweet H was irresponsible? He mentions category 5 thoughts. I do not think his tweet is irresponsible here, guys. There is a risk for a category 4 or category 5 hurricane lore. Our models struggle with the intensity of hurricanes. With the reducing wind shear that's being predicted over the Gulf of Mexico due to Marco pretty much clearing out the environment at 30 degrees Celsius waters with the high ocean heat content, I don't see why this storm can't intensify. But again, we're not a fortune teller as meteorologists. We rely on our weather models to give us guidance to make us educated calls. And I think that by dismissing a major hurricane landfall with Laura is a mistake. Question here: can Mississippi be back in the zone since the models have been trending back east? There's still, I think that the best chances is for a landfall for both these systems to the west of Mississippi. So I'm worried about Texas and I'm worried about Louisiana, but it's still not out of the woods yet because we still have to see the system spin back up yet. If Laura remains weak, goes to this rapid intensification cycle, then yeah, there's a chance that it drifts towards Mississippi as a weaker tropical cyclone. Any thoughts about the rest of the season, especially end of August, September? So I kind of outlined that just a while ago. We went over why the steering currents are impacting that. What's causing the storms to track into the U.S. That's the subtropical high that's built off over the western subtropical Atlantic. I appreciate you coming down from Mobile, Alabama. I understand why you're concerned there, and I'm concerned as well. But I do think that we really have to send out some prayers for Louisiana and Texas here. But there could be storm surge considerations though still for parts of Alabama. So keep an eye on that, guys. It's been a tough tracking and forecast with Laura. Just how's it interacting with land there? So that's one thing that we'll have to pay attention to as that system moves off of land. I showed the graph model. I can continue on Wednesday when I do my lunch series. I will share the newest update with graph and what the 3-kilometer and the 15-kilometer model will be showing. So that's something to. I am glad that I can be showing here in these streams, and I think it's something that's great that IBM's doing by developing high resolution modeling and making it available on your phone. And we're actually using that high resolution data to be put into our forecasts. Hey guys, appreciate Weatherboy 2025 and Butters Bree for the subscriptions there. Thanks guys so much for subscribing. I do want to say that I do have a Discord channel that I promoted on my Twitter. If you guys join the Discord and you let me know, show me that you're a subscriber, we'll add you a tag there for a subscriber on Twitch. So thanks so much there for that, guys. I appreciate it. Lex, I see my buddy from Call of Duty joined up. I appreciate you joining here. Play some Call of Duty after this. I think I'll play a little bit of Call of Duty after this, guys. So if you guys want to watch some Call of Duty after the stream, I'll probably be jumping on here in maybe the next 30 minutes or so. But that's still to be decided. I have some things I need to care of first. So I'm not 100% sure about the COD, but I'd like to play. A question from Florida Dork. Could the center of Laura relocate even further south under all that massive convection burst? Obviously, this would be minimize land interaction, allow for short-term strengthening. It's possible. It seems like the models in the circulation this mid-level circulation is moving over parts of Cuba now. So I don't think that it's going to continue. I think that the models are starting to resolve that interaction. But there's always a chance that we see a mesoscale vortex spit out to the south of that, and this kind of redevelops south of there. But as Laura moves away from Cuba, I think that's where the opportunity for rapid intensification will be, and that's what is going to make this very dangerous for parts of the Gulf states. I see some chatter on Harvey. Harvey was a very devastating hurricane. I'll never forget the Hurricane Harvey for some personal reasons, but I was not happy to see that storm, and there was a lot of flooding down in parts of Texas there. So I do, U.S. from John J. Williamson, whether a upper level pattern would anticipate a big U.S. threat with time, I do agree that there are big threats here. And I think that the H-WRF model and some of the higher resolution models like the graph are representing that risk. Though I hope that, the best case scenario is that the model, that LoRa never gets going again. Maybe Cuba does enough damage on the circulation that keeps it weak, and this tracks into the U.S. as mainly a rain event. I don't think that probability is high, though. I think the probability of a stronger system is higher and a more impactful system. Should these storms get rid of ocean heat content for future storms, or do they not make a difference? So that's a great question. If you have a strong enough hurricane, it does. These hurricanes can actually cause upwelling in the Gulf of Mexico, and that's because the Gulf of Mexico is pretty shallow. The thermocline is pretty shallow there, so it can absorb all the energy that's coming from the ocean up into the storm. It actually creates the upwelling in the ocean from cold waters coming to the top and of the surface and cooling off the top of the surface. So that's why we see these imprints and sea surface temperature anomalies after a hurricane goes through the Gulf of Mexico. I do think that there's a chance of that to happen. And I think, though, however, that being said, I don't think the next set of hurricanes to spawn over the tropical Atlantic will be Gulf of Mexico systems. I think they're going to be more of like the Cabo Verde type storms that track and maybe potentially impact the eastern seaboard, similar to what I've represented in the Eastern Desert ensembles. But it's a great question about upwelling and how tropical cyclones talk to the ocean and how the two can actually interact with each other. Looking at the radar for LoRa, it looks like the mesoscale vortex has died out. Do you think it will continue the trend from PR to Hispaniola, where it will bring again the LSC south? Yeah, I think that there's going to be some convective bursts on and off, and there's diurnal cycles of convection that can play some timing issues on when convection looks good versus when it looks bad in a tropical cyclone in that part of the world. So I think the convection is going to come back. It seems like the models suggest that it'll mainly be to the south of Cuba as the system tracks west-northwestward in the next 24 to 30 hours or so. And I think that the lull of the circulation will recouple again. And I think the rapid intensification is probably going to happen. If it does happen, it'll probably happen on Tuesday morning. Hey, what's up? QO Pats, appreciate you joining and stopping by and promoting the Discord. And thanks, guys, for joining that. Good friend from high school, Russ B here. What's up, buddy? Thanks so much for joining the stream. And I see that there's some questions on the Discord. What is the Discord channel? So I will post a link into this right now, into my Twitch stream, so you guys, if I can do that. I guess I can't do that. I'll make sure to tweet out a link of the Discord channel so you guys can join up. Actually, I can do that right now. There we go. There's a link to the Discord channel, guys. So if you want to join a new community where we have some great administrators and moderators on the Discord, they're doing a good job of keeping things protected from, I guess, raids. I'm like an old man here. I had never heard of a raid before. I think of like Raiders of the Lost Ark or something like that. But we have a great community growing there with people sharing an immense amount of knowledge and updates to these potential storms. So if you want to talk with them and be part of that community, come on, join up. It's a great community, and it's new, it's fresh. There's also, things on there for if you're trying to become an aspiring meteorologist. We have threads about what colleges are good, what universities you should attend. There's tags for future meteorologists. There's tags for meteorologists in general. There's, National Weather Service tags. If you're a government employee and want to join up, you'll get your own tag and be visible from the crowd. And there's also things about gaming on there, right? I'm a gaming nerd. I do some Call of Duty. I enjoy playing video games and streaming that. So if you guys are watching the stream and you like to play video games, there's a community for that as well. So with that, guys, if there's no more questions, I can end this here. And I want to say that I will continue to update these systems, what's going on in the systems here. And I think that honestly, I'm a bit concerned about the Gulf states, and that's, I've iterated that a number of times. So I'll stop there. Wednesdays at noon, I do a tropical lunch break discussion, 12 p.m. Eastern time. If you guys have free time from work, come stop by. We'll do an update here on what's happening and where lore is going. Thanks so much, guys, for the watching the stream, the Twitch subscribers, the followers, and the Discord joining. Appreciate it, guys. Stay safe out there, and we'll keep an eye on this to keep you all safe as possible.